Hi guys, I just wanted to show you a few pen and ink techniques to kind of think about when you are finishing your 7 deadly vices or your 7 heavenly virtues. So looking at this composition, I just want to point out a few things. I think when you're using pen and ink, it's good to have great contrast. So you can see I have a very dense black area here, and it's balanced by a lot of kind of solid blacks down here. I want you to pay attention to line variation, and that means thick and thin lines, sometimes in the same line. So if you see this arm goes from thin to thick, back to thin, then thick again. And I like to use thicker lines when I want to communicate gravity, so heaviness or shadow, or I want to separate certain areas from others. So I think I could even have taken some of this even further. So any pens that you have around the house, including the ones that I have in the kit, are totally acceptable for this project. In fact, sometimes I really like the cheap ballpoint pens, you know, like these come in different kind of weights. So I would just kind of gather an arsenal of pens so that you have a whole bunch of different ways of doing mark making. But when it comes to pens, there's not a huge amount of skill needed. What I do is I like to always have a piece of paper next to me when I'm doing my final composition, so that I can test the pen and make sure it's like working and not dry before I start, or if I want to test a mark out beforehand. So obviously different pens have different line weights, but there's always ways of thickening a line up and going back in to kind of create the effect that the line is getting thicker or swelling or getting thinner, okay? So just kind of see what pens, what they can do. So we have some different methods of making, if you want a sense of texture or pattern, you could do hatching. Hatching is when you have lines that are close together, but they are just kind of parallel to one another. And then cross hatching is when you actually kind of cross them. If you get closer together, it appears to be darker. If you go farther apart, it appears to be kind of wider and more open. So there's some, quick ways of getting a sense of going from darker to lighter, okay? With pen, you can do almost anything. If you notice on my little poor doggy, here I did a kind of scribbly texture in his fur to give a sense that he has this kind of moppy fur, or did. So you can use your pen to create lots of different textures, and you'd be surprised, like just scribbling kind of communicates a lot. And again, if you spend a lot of time in a dense area, it's going to look darker, and then you can get lighter as you kind of move out. I would just try lots of different textures and patterns, lots of different pens. Even the cheap ones can give kind of an interesting range of ways of making marks, okay? You could even stipple. If you're super patient, you can do something called stippling, which works best with felt tip pens, but that's basically where you have lots of dots kind of close together. That might work for kind of a small area, but you might get overwhelmed if you do a large area. Your thicker Sharpie will obviously give you a thicker line and is great for filling in areas of darkness. And for filling in areas of darkness, I would try to keep your pen going in the same direction. So that if you hold up the solid area to the light, you won't see a huge, you won't see the marks going all different directions. It will look very kind of nice and organized, and you won't get distracted by the weird scribbly mark making, unless you want that effect. So I like to, how I started the composition was I outlined everything with the thinner Sharpie. Like you probably noticed on my website, like the 7 Deadly Vices was originally just kind of outlined, and then I filled in the background. And I do that so I can make decisions along the way, okay? So those are just all, I'm just wanting you guys to think about contrast and balance. So if you have something heavy over here, you might want to balance it over here. You don't want this side totally white and this side totally dark unless that's your composition, that's what you're trying to communicate. You want it kind of flowing around. You want to keep the viewer, in your composition for as long as possible. So just, try to think about those things. Overlapping is an effective and fun way to kind of create relationships. So when you overlap one thing with another, just make sure that you can tell the difference between the two of them. Like I might work on this section just to kind of show that a little bit more. I might even start to put in some pattern in this area. So maybe I want some stripes to kind of ground this section. Just switch pens here. And these Sharpies do like to bleed a little bit, so just kind of do a test first to see the spread of it before you tackle it so it doesn't get out of control. Yeah, so you can see that this is starting to kind of ground this shape, but you might have to kind of go over things a little bit more, okay? All right, so I'm gonna send this off to you guys. That's all we're really doing on this assignment is just trying your best to pull and push and pull the composition, a nice balances of black and white, pattern, and mark making. All right, just have fun with your Sharpies. Okay, see you next week.